Good afternoon, good morning to all of you in our audience. As Randy said, my name is Mike Preble. I am a policy analyst at New America Center on Education and Labor. New America is a nonpartisan public policy think tank based in Washington, D.C., dedicated to renewing the promise of America by honestly confronting the challenges posed by social and technological change. We're proud to have co-hosted the annual NICE conference alongside FIU for the past 3 years. And we're also extremely grateful to you that you've chosen to spend a little bit of time this afternoon with us. We're excited to get started with this plenary on transforming the learning ecosystem, where we'll be exploring the question of how to leverage diverse learning ecosystems, credentials, and assessments to equip learners with the skills necessary to succeed in the cybersecurity workforce. So I have the pleasure of introducing our panelists for this session, some of whom we've gotten to know at New America through our work on apprenticeships and community college innovations, others who we're meeting just for the first time through this conference. Olivia Herriford is Regional Director for Employer Engagement, focusing on information and communications technologies for the Bay Area Community College Consortium, a network of 28 community colleges in the Bay Area. Before serving at BACC, Olivia managed the City College of San Francisco's Registered Apprenticeship Program in cybersecurity and has previously served as an Associate Director of a regional center of the National Science Foundation's Advanced Technical Education Program and as a consultant for the Career Pathways Project, Career Ladders Project. Olivia also had a long career in the tech industry herself before joining the community college and workforce development ecosystem. Matt Lisle would be our hometown hero if we were able to be in person in Atlanta as planned. Matt is the Director of Digital Learning Technologies at Georgia Tech's Center for 21st Century Universities, or C21U, where he combines his professional experience in instructional design, web development, and content strategies to support C21U's exploration of next-generation educational practices and technologies. Prior to joining C21U, Matt served as Digital Course Design Coordinator at the University of Texas at Austin and as Creative Director at Inspire Learning. Also joining us from the West Coast, we have Tim Mason. Tim is Professor of Technology and Division Chair at the Green River College in Auburn, Washington. Tim previously served as a Chief Cryptologist for the Department of Defense and also worked as a Chief Information Security Officer in the private sector before he started teaching at Green River College 15 years ago. Tim directs Green River's Bachelor of Applied Science in Cybersecurity Networking and is a member of the Muckleshoot Indian Tribe in Auburn. He also serves as coordinator of Green River's IT partnership with Muckleshoot Tribal College. So before I introduce our moderator, I wanted to mention that we've only got about 45 minutes for our conversation today. We won't be able to cover every aspect of this topic, which is a big one, but we'd love to hear your input and questions. So I'd encourage you to enter any questions or comments that you might have. You can add them in the Q&A here, and I will be sure to pass them along to our panelists. So with that, last but not least is our moderator, Chauncy Lennon. Chauncy is Vice President for Learning and Work at Lumina Foundation, an independent private foundation based in Indianapolis, committed to making opportunities for learning beyond high school available to all. Before joining Lumina, Chauncy was Managing Director and Leader of Workforce Strategy at JPMorgan Chase & Company, after having served other roles at the Ford Foundation. Chauncy also serves as a member of the New York City Workforce Development Board, and we thank him for leading our conversation today. So Chauncy, over to you.
Thanks so much, Mike, and thank you all for joining us. So I'm at the Lumina Foundation, and if you know us, you know that our central focus is the post-secondary attainment goal. We're hoping to have 60% of all adults in the US receive a credential of value by 2025. We recently released a new strategy plan. That's our kind of final argument of how we're going to get there. That plan focuses on a three-legged strategy. The first is thinking about how we need to do a better job building employment-aligned programs, whether those are short-term programs, whether those are certification programs, BA programs, or advanced degree programs. We need many, many more ways in which learning leads to credentials, which are then connected and aligned to what the labor market is looking for. Cybersecurity is one of the sectors where we've seen so many great strides, but there's so much more we can do. We're also focused on communications, ensuring that people know about these opportunities. A diverse set of post-secondary learners understand that there are options here, whether you're getting a short-term credential or an advanced degree, to go and get the skills that the cybersecurity industry, among many other industries, are looking for. And finally, we're focused on building greater opportunities to ensure that students persist to complete. We need community colleges four-year institutions, advanced research universities. Everyone has to think about student success and build a model around student success, no matter what kind of learner we're talking about. I mentioned those themes because we're going to talk about these as we talk about the work that all of our panelists are doing. And I want to start us off by asking a question in which everybody has a chance to tell us what they think is working, what isn't working in the way we assess, educate, and counsel cybersecurity learners. Why don't we start with Olivia?
Well, one of the things I think we really need to better understand is why we have this persistent gap between the talent that we're preparing and the jobs that are out there. And I think we have to dig down deeper because we still have a lot of gaps in the learning pathway. So I think what we need to do if we're going to do more research is better understand what those gaps are and begin to address them. And it's really great to see that that's part of the NICE strategy. I think another area we need to better understand is employer expectations. We have 33 specialty areas in the framework, and our employers will often post names of positions very similar to those specialty areas, but two employers will have two different sets of expectations for those positions. And I really think that we can begin to use the framework to work with employers to make sure that we have some consistency. And that inconsistency in the descriptions from the employer perspectives of those jobs really also makes it difficult for us as educators to prepare programs that are going to prepare students for those positions. So I really think that that's one of the things that we could, if you're looking for things that's what's working and what we can do to better understand that. The other thing that I think we need to also understand is that just like information technology, information security has become ubiquitous. And so we have to learn to talk, we have to begin to talk to all employers are beginning to have an information security requirement and understand how they fit into the framework and how we can also prepare for those types of positions. So I think one of the things I think we really need to do, and is, like I said, I'm glad to see it as part of the framework, is working with employers and understanding and defining those positions.
Thanks so much. Matt, let's turn to you.
Okay, thank you. I'll start with what I think is not working, and for me, that's really credentials. When you think about, especially in a field like cybersecurity, the fact that people need to continuously go back and learn new skills, and their learning journey continues all the way through their career. We don't really have a good way for people to express or to share their records of all the different types of learning experiences they've had. When I was thinking about this, I saw a statistic that was relevant, and that was during the pandemic, Coursera's saw a 400% increase in new users, just people going out and trying to get new skills. And when you think about all those people who did that, going out to Coursera, completing MOOCs, trying to get new skills, and they want to share those, combine those credentials with a boot camp they did 2 years ago, or with a degree that they got 10 years ago. There is no learner-centric model where all those credentials are easy to gather in one place and share with potential employers. So I would say that's what's not working. And then what is working is related to that, and that's the fact that everyone recognizes this is a problem. So it's good that there's a lot of projects going on. We're at Georgia Tech, we're involved with the Digital Credentials Consortium, which is a group of 12 universities looking at this problem, but there's also IMS Global's working on this problem, the T3 Innovation Network. I mean, there's a lot of people thinking about this. So it's good that people recognize that it's a problem and are currently working on it.
Terrific, thanks. Tim, why don't you finish us off?
Well, I'd like to echo both Olivia and Matt. There is a huge disparity between what an employer needs and what they ask for. And often you end up in a situation where the employer identifies a particular job with a job title that really has nothing to do with what they really want. And so one of the things that we have done is we've literally reached out to the hiring managers themselves and basically started relationships where that way we could talk to them, we could find out exactly what it is that they're really looking for rather than what they're asking for, and try to plug a student into, at the beginning, into an internship or something like that, that gets their foot in the door. And then all of a sudden the company realizes, well, wait a minute, this does work, you know. And to leverage what Matt said about the credentials are huge. We know that. But at the same time, a lot of your employers really don't recognize how important the credentials are. You know, they'll often look at one particular place and say, I only want people who come from that university, or I only want people who have this or have that. When in reality, they're overlooking a lot of people, especially people who may not have had advantages before, you know, like tribal people or people who come from different groups that haven't been associated with cybersecurity. So I think it's our part in the middle to show both sides that this is possible.
Terrific. And I realize I should have maybe asked this question first, but I want to go in reverse order and have you just say a few words about, you know, your organization, where you work, and, you know, how you see your organization responding to the challenge of what's working, what's not working, just so everyone has a better sense of the kind of work you're all involved with. Tim, why don't you kick us off?
Oh, well, thank you. Well, we've partnered with the Muckleshoot, and basically we educated their instructors. They got degrees from our college. We put our programs there. We teach the coursework there, and then the students transfer because they get scholarships at Muckleshoot, so that way it doesn't cost them anything. We're talking about people who have no money, okay? So they're able to get through their first 2 years there, transfer to Green River into the bachelor's degree program. We get them through the bachelor's degree program, and typically between year 3 and year 4, which is the way we refer to it, the students then either do an internship or an apprenticeship at a company that's local that we've identified. We help the student with all that. And then they continue their work because we work with the organization so they can. So then they finish their bachelor's. We have an agreement with UW. They go on and they get their master's degree should they desire. And then UW has an agreement with Colorado, so that way they can go to Colorado State University and get a PhD. So we've created a pathway, and I love to use that term because if you come from an area like I did when I was a kid and your dad makes $75 a week, you have to have a pathway shown to you that you can get there. So.
Terrific, thanks. Matt, why don't you tell us a little bit about you know, what your team is up to?
Okay, so I'm in the Center for 21st Century Universities, or C21U for short, at Georgia Tech, and we are basically a think tank. We think about the future of education, and we have a combination of researchers and instructional designers and technologists. My role is Director of Digital Learning Technologies, and so I'll just give 2 examples of projects that my team's involved with that's related to this panel. One is the work with the Digital Credentials Consortium, which I'll save for later. I think I'll probably talk about that more later. The second is a NSF-funded project called Competency Catalyst, where we're trying to help the collaboration between companies and colleges to reskill current employees. So we're thinking about the future of education from a lifelong learning aspect.
Terrific. Olivia, tell us a little bit more about the work you're doing.
Well, the Bay Area Community College Consortium supports the 28 community colleges in the San Francisco Bay Area, and primarily around career education and workforce development. Under that organization, there are regional directors for employer engagement for all of the high priority industry sectors in California. ICT Digital Media is the one that I represent, but we have healthcare regional directors, advanced manufacturing, et cetera. And our role is to connect with employers and industry to better understand their needs and what they're expecting for our students in our programs, as well as get them engaged in work-based learning opportunities. I was really excited about getting into this role because what I learned in my experience in managing the registered apprenticeship was one of the biggest challenges was getting employers on board. There is still, you know, some mystifying issue around getting them, particularly in the private sector and industry sector, in really understanding what an opportunity this is. And it's really been really great. I've learned an awful lot about what expectations are. And really the good news is to see what's working is that the employers that I'm talking to, particularly in the information security, because they are so attuned to this talent gap, really do want to get involved and work with us. So it's been pretty exciting.
Terrific. And I actually want to stay with you, Olivia, and ask a question that has to do with employers. So, you know, increasingly we're hearing about the private sector, the federal government, the hiring based on skills, not degrees. And that, you know, that concept has got a lot of traction in recent years. But from your perspective, what needs to change to increase the trust of different credentials and learning pathways in the job market?
Well, you know, I think it is. It's exposure to our programs and our students, and you know, the employers that I'm talking to are echoing that. I mean, you know, if you just demonstrate that you can do what I need, I don't care what degree you have, but a lot of that depends on getting experience. So one of the things I think we really need to do, again, is get them more involved along the entire pathway, all the way from competitions to internships and then to jobs. But, you know, the other thing that I'm hearing is a different kind of process for evaluating that talent. A lot I'm hearing our employers are doing for our cybersecurity talent, the same thing employers are asking of people who are interviewing for like software development. A software developer during an interview has to go up and do whiteboard coding. Well, employers are telling me that when they're talking to a potential InfoSec or cyber role, that they would like the potential employee to do the same thing. You know, whip out a laptop, use a free AWS account to build an environment and show them how they would deal with a problem. So that experiential aspect of our learning really needs to also, we need to take a look at how we do that better.
No, I think it's a great example. And I think, you know, really it's going to be about the devil will be in the details here in terms of how employers can actually make skills-based hiring a reality, right? And thinking about, you know, where they can take the lessons they've already had in other sectors, other occupations, and apply them in cybersecurity. But thank you for that. It's a great example. Matt, what do you see as some of the challenges and opportunities and efforts to pilot digital credentials and learning and employment records?
Well, I would say two things, and one is related to some of what Olivia was just talking about, but it's about coalescing around a standard for credentials. And when you think about employers being able to trust credentials, that's one great example of why coalescing is important, because if you kind of lock credentials into different standards or different technologies or different vendors or whatever, verified can mean a very different thing for every credential, and then it becomes less and less meaningful to employers. So if in one case verified means that we verify the issuer and the person is issued to, in the other case we just verify the date, they don't know what to make of that and how to trust these credentials. So it's also important for the learners, I mean, for the end user, the owner of the credential, to not end up with 5 or 6 different wallets that contain credentials. So one is just coalescing. The other is maybe more on the higher ed side, but a potential challenge or a challenge that we've experienced is just establishing processes for issuing credentials or approving credentials in the higher ed space. There's typically an oversight and governance process when a new certificate's offered or a new program's offered. But when you're thinking specifically more about skills-based credentials or micro-credentials, there's not really often processes for how to create and approve those. And so I think in those cases, the technology of issuing is somewhat easy. It's the governance process stuff that's hard. So those are two.
Thanks. And Tim, when you think about career pathway programs, often we think about those as having a kind of a closer link and alignment with employers. How do you see this issue about skills-based hiring factoring into how we think about robust career pathway programs?
Oh, that's a very broad question. Each student comes with their own challenges, and each organization has its own challenges. Unless you have communication between the two, you're not going to match them up. And the work that Olivia is doing and the things that we are doing and Matt's doing that are demonstrating to these employers, I think it's important because you have to have both ends understanding what's going on. Now, while our students are pursuing the program, one of the things that we do is we basically, as we're teaching a course, we're prepping a student on the way through that course towards getting a certification, okay? So there's certifications as part of the program. So when the student reaches a certain point, they're employable. So if the student has a family or needs to go to work, and of course we deal with a lot of disadvantaged students as far as financial is concerned. And so they're able to go to work earlier and continue their education, which, as we know, both are very important. But it's important not just for the student, but it's also important for the employer. I have a lot of meetings that I set up with employers to talk to them about this. And then a lot of times I will introduce a student and I will vouch for that student based on their grades and the fact that we deal with students continuously. I'm always meeting with students, and all of our faculty are. I think that is extremely important.
Terrific. Let me stick with you and ask a question about, cyber. We often think of it as a career field where backgrounds in computer science, engineering are the most in demand. How do you illustrate that cybersecurity roles are broad, diverse, and require a multidisciplinary approach? And how do you teach diverse skills? How do you ensure that the person has both the sort of domain-specific skills and yet kind of the skills you need in a kind of foundational way to be a successful employee?
Well, number one, we actually recruit diversity, okay? We're looking for students from everywhere, international, everywhere. It doesn't matter, okay? That's number one. The student is important, and it doesn't matter where they come from. Okay, that's number one. Number two, in the program itself, we're looking to what the employer is asking for. We've noticed the last several years, they're asking for more scripting, they're asking for more Python, they're asking for more programming. And so what we're doing is we actually changed the program. It seems like every year, but it's a continual process to where if the employer is asking for more scripting, we put more scripting in. And we're not just talking about one class. You start at the beginning where they get some scripting, they get a little bit, maybe a Python. As they move through the program, it's getting more and more advanced. By the time they're done, the student has been gradually introduced, made intermediate, and able to go to work, so that way they don't feel overwhelmed. The classes are taught synchronously now, especially because we're dealing with COVID-19. But we can look at their desktops, we can help them. You have to do this. Our students are going to work at Amazon and Google and Microsoft and all these other places, and they're asking for this, so we have to give it to them, right? And that's how we do it.
Thanks. Olivia, how about you? How do you think about this challenge of balancing both the kind of specific skills with the broader kind of more multidisciplinary approach?
Well, I want to reiterate what Tim was saying. We take a very similar approach. It seems like we're having, we must update our curriculum on a regular basis. And that's another important thing about having employers involved in informing us on that. And obviously, one of the things that's really important to us is that we do reach out and raise awareness, particularly in areas where we want to reach diverse students. I think the other thing that we're learning, And we had this experience during the apprenticeship program. You know, there's a usually for a registered apprentice, you have a apprenticeship committee, and we were updating our RSI every year because of what we were hearing. And one of the things that the employers were telling us was what Tim was reiterating. They want scripting ability, but also they want the personal skills. So we added as a kind of like a pre-apprenticeship requirement that they start to take some of these courses, integrate some of those courses and workforce development activities around improving their, you know, their personal and professional skills. You know, another interesting thing that we're also starting to take a look at is collaboration with other disciplines, because what we're hearing, you know, when our employers come and talk to our students, they don't have computer science degrees. They maybe came in through accounting or business, but how do they get there? And so we're working with our business departments, our healthcare departments, and looking at how are we going to prepare, depending on the role and the career path that the student wants to go in, to make sure that just like information technology, information security is part of those programs as well.
Terrific. And Matt, you know, as you guys are looking across the industry and looking at how training's evolving, you know, is this something you're seeing? Is programs thinking about striking a balance between the sort of general and kind of specific skill sets?
Yeah, actually, we were, this reminds me of a recent interview for this project we were doing. We were going through the design process for this project that I mentioned earlier, Competency Catalyst. And we were talking to employers and different higher ed institutions. And we heard of a story a few times, which is that often when it comes to creating job roles or thinking about a job role at a company, at the higher level of the company, they do think more holistically and broad set of skills. And then it comes time to write a job description, and that falls to a hiring manager. And often a hiring manager it writes a job description that's a list of the tasks that need to be taken off their plate over the next couple of months. And so it does seem like within companies that there is sort of a disconnect about, you know, what level of skills and how broad and inclusive a set of skills should go into a job description or a job posting.
Mm-hmm. That's a great example. Right? I think we often think about employers defaulting to a BA, but we also have to think about what actually ends up in the job description and how that also is driven kind of in not necessarily about the sort of demands of the job. Let's talk a little bit about employer engagement. Tim, you know, what roles can employers play to support colleges like yours in improving learners' cyber skills?
Okay, well, basically, they have to work with us. You know, what we have found in our area is that you know, there are a lot of community colleges, there are a lot of universities, and everybody calls on the same people to come to their meetings and serve on their advisory boards. And that creates a lot of issues. You know, a lot of people really don't want to be on multiple boards. They have a lot on their plate already. They're, you know, we're talking about the employers. So basically what we did is we got together with a lot of the community colleges in the area, and we created a consortium so that way we meet with the employers together. You know, what the employers are asking for are the same regardless of what college you go to. And so that actually is working out quite well. We had two sides to our program. We had the cybersecurity and networking. We also had software development. And it's amazing how both of them are now working more towards the same goal than they were previously, especially with what you were mentioning earlier about more scripting and more software type skills that used to be completely computer science.
Terrific. And Olivia, you know, this classic challenge of employers speak one language, education training providers speak another. They talk on different timetables. You know, lots of ways in which you know it's hard to get them together. You know, what are you seeing as kind of what's working? What's, you know, what we need to do more of to get employers to work on you know, better training?
Well, I really think that Tim's approach is very similar to what we just recently kicked off, and that is having a regional advisory, and because I think it provides more economy of time for our employers. And I have to admit, some of our program advisories need some strengthening. And so we have been successful in getting buy-in from and participation from our community college partners to come together and work with us. And we have the employers that are more interested in looking and helping all of the colleges instead of one at a time. And it's working out very well. And not only for cybersecurity, we're bringing them together for all of the pathways under ICT. But it's working out pretty well because it complements whatever advisories that they have, and it really saves a lot of the employers' time.
Let me ask a follow-up question. Thinking about your experience around apprenticeship, what are the ways in which work-based learning can sort of is happening? Is it happening enough? Is there promising signs about how cybersecurity, that can sort of become part of what employers think about as when they sort of bring people into the workplace?
Yes, and I really think what we need to do, and what we're doing, is we're partnering with industry organizations that's been very successful because they're feeling the pain too. So one of the things that has been most effective and what our employer representatives love to do is come and speak to our students as guest lecturers or doing tech talks about a day in their life and what it's like. And it just really, it contributes to motivating the students to stay on the pathway. The employers get exposure to our students and get to see the kind of questions and things they're interested in. And they've come away pretty impressed with, hey, this is a potential pipeline. So it goes two ways. We can get a lot of input from the employers as far as guiding our programs, but it also provides exposure to them, to our students and what we're doing. And then they continue to offer these opportunities for, guest lectures, site visits, internships, paid and unpaid. And then hopefully, eventually, we're really trying to get our apprenticeship off the ground.
Terrific. So Matt, let's talk about another challenge, that one that maybe doesn't get enough attention, right? So we often think about the skills gap. We need more people with cybersecurity skills to sort of feed demand in the industry. But we often overlook the reality that we're struggling to find enough qualified teachers, enough qualified counselors. We don't really have the infrastructure on the training side to build these robust pipelines of talent. What's your thoughts about that issue? What should we be doing more of to address that challenge?
Well, I think we'll see more college company partnerships to address this challenge, like working closely together. There's a really cool project coming out of IMS Global called Wellspring, and they're partnering. I think the general issue is that companies don't have enough, like you're saying, they don't have enough instructional design trainers. They don't have enough talent internally to develop the training that they need to reskill employees. So they're partnering with colleges, and so they're doing some pilots where they have a company and a college work together to design a specific credential, and they write competency frameworks for the credential that are attached to the credential so that the credential is actually more meaningful. So I think one thing, I think it benefits the college because a close collaboration with a company like that really makes sure that they're really plugged into the needs of industry. But for industry, that they're, especially in a field like cybersecurity, it's going to be really difficult to keep up with the training needs for their current employees, not to mention incoming employees. So if they can really get in sync with colleges and work together on creating not just asking for a course and having it thrown over a wall to them, but creating courses together, creating credentials together, creating programs together, that seems like a really big first step.
And are we doing enough to think about that beyond just one firm? I mean, what are the ways we can think about that as from the perspective of the sector, as opposed to one or two firms who kind of are more predisposed to engage with the local universities and community colleges?
Yeah, I think to expand that out and scale it out to where it's bigger than some of these pilots. I think the first thing is on the education side. I think we have to find the time and motivation and make it happen to where our courses and programs are broken down at the atomic level, so that the specific knowledge, skills, and abilities, or the competencies that are covered in a course or a program don't just live in someone's head or in a spreadsheet. That information is broken down, documented, and transparent and shareable. And I think once you do that, then more companies are going to be willing to make use of that data and to find the right college partners to reskill their current employees or to develop the pipeline. But yeah, I think a really first step, it really, I think, falls on the education side. It falls on us to really break our stuff down and document it at the atomic level.
Terrific. So let me ask one sort of final question to all of you, and to everyone else listening. If you've got questions, please put them into the Q&A, and we can get to those in a minute. So Tim, let me sort of start with you. So the good news of this conversation is there's lots of activity out there, right? We're seeing training providers, educators, education institutions building programs, building them at all different kinds of levels, sort of thinking about all the various kinds of skill demand that we're seeing in the field. How are we going to know that we've got it right? How do we know that these pathways, these pipeline programs, are actually creating the kind of skilled workforce that we need? What kind of research do we need? What kind of employer kind of feedback should we be looking to understand how effective we are at building this talent ecosystem in cybersecurity?
Oh, thank you for asking that question. I think we've all struggled over the years with getting feedback from employers about students who have graduated and gone to work there. One of the things that we do is I directly interface with these people. So I'm talking to them, I'm asking them how they're doing. How's this student doing? I genuinely care. I also check in with the student via LinkedIn. I'm one of those guys. And so I'm always asking them, well, how are you doing? What's your current position? Are you still happy? All this kind of stuff. I think that's very important. Now, if we want to talk about a model, if we want to talk about research, what we really should be doing is we should have a national survey where we can, and people who will actually answer it, and get a list of what the gaps are. And then as a community, we can work together using that research to determine what we need to do within our programs. And of course, everybody's program is going to be somewhat tailored to their area, the geographical area.
Terrific. Olivia, what's on your wish list of what more should we know to help us understand, if we're doing things the right way?
Well, I'm working on something on my wish list because we want to do very similar things to what Tim is talking about, but that's hard to scale when you've got, 28 colleges and, thousands of students. And so one of the things that we're working on is kind of like, a supporting infrastructure that will allow us to, the student and the employers and educators to be able to support the student along the pathway and know where they're at, look at how they're completing or having challenges, bring the support in, whether that be kind of wraparound support or financial support, assign mentors, but that takes a management system. And that's my wish list. That's my wish, and that's what we're working on. And we're finding it working in other areas as well. I mean, this is really important, especially for underserved students. Mm-hmm. So you asked me what's on my wish list. That's what it is.
And, I think that to the extent we've succeeded there, we've succeeded more with traditional students, right? Full-time, often first-time students, right? And thinking about, this is going to be a workforce. We're going to have lots of adults who are coming back to sort of upskill or reskill, are not going to be full-time students, but they need academic, non-academic supports as well to help them kind of get,
Exactly.
persist and succeed on their learning. Matt, how about you? What do you, when you, as someone who's sitting in a research shop, what are you thinking about? What are you worried about whether we're getting the alignment between supply and demand, getting it right?
Well, the thing that I worry about is whether or not we're talking to, I'm going to call them the learner, but the learner, the worker, the student, whether we're involving them in the process and maybe even like having them participate in the design of some of these solutions we're coming up with. I'll just give a really quick kind of funny, it's funny to me, funny example of this. So we were doing usability research and just usability interviews with students at Georgia Tech about some of the work we were doing with digital credentials. And one thing that we really ran into with multiple students, I mean, this wasn't a one-off, was vocabulary. These students didn't know what to make of words like issuer or wallet, and even the word credential didn't mean anything to them. They heard credential and they thought username, password. They didn't think certificate or degree. And that's, if we hadn't talked to these students, that would have never have occurred to me. So I feel like our general ecosystem has a lot of great ideas, but I do feel like we need to break out of it and make sure we're talking to the people that it really matters to, and involve them in the process of designing our solutions.
So it's a humbling thing to hear that story about how people understood the word credential, being from a foundation that is all about getting people more credentials. So, but a great lesson about recognizing that just because we have sort of industry vocabulary, that doesn't travel very far necessarily when you're thinking about bringing people in as new entrants to the field. All right, let's turn to some of the questions we've gotten from the audience. So we've talked a bit about standards, and there's been a discussion about learning and employment records in the the Q&A chat. This is really a topic Lumina has been very involved with. And we've got a lot of interest from employers as well in the federal and state government. What are the kinds of procedural challenges for universities, employers, to adopting standards that communicate competencies gained through education and work? And what must we keep in mind as we make sure that all learners benefit from increasing transparency in competencies and credentials? Let me ask this another way. As we try to make all of this more uniform, how does that potentially support or maybe undermine some of what you talked about, Tim, the way in which, building networks, sharing information with employers about the strengths and interests of potential workers. How do we see some of these challenges? Tim, let me start with you.
Okay. Communication and sharing is never a bad thing, period. Okay. The individual organizations, as opposed to the broader field, for example, can be challenging, but I think it's important that you share these. And let me tell you why. You've got a lot of small organizations, let's say medium to small businesses out there, and I ran one for years, that think that this is what I need as a cybersecurity professional. And they're in this box. And they don't really realize that there's much more to the field. And the problem is they get hacked and bad things happen because they hire somebody in the box. So we tell them to get out of the box and to look at all these other competencies. And a lot of that's got to do with trust. When you build a relationship with somebody and you sit down with them and you tell them this is what's going on and this is the research that we're finding, then people have a tendency to believe you and to listen to you if they trust you. And so that's part of it. But by these standards, we did it in the Navy. I mean, we had standards that said in this job, you got to know these 50 things, period, right? So, I think we can do it on a national scale. It's just going to take work and it's going to take funding, but it is something that I think is very worthy of some serious research.
But it's I think your point is well taken, that we don't want to make this we don't want standards become the new kind of like BA threshold for hiring, right? You really you want, you know, the standards only work if they're really capturing skills and the employers understand when they need those skills and when they don't need those skills, right? And that's always, you know, a challenge with implementation. Matt, what's your sense of you know, this issue and where we can go on you know, doing better at sort of sharing and communicating competencies?
Yeah, I think there's a tension. So I would go back to meaningful credentials that have competency frameworks attached to them, and I think there's a tension between, on the one hand, you want them to be flexible so that credentials of all shapes and sizes, and you want them to be decentralized so that they're controlled by the learner and the learner has agency over them, and that it's not relying on someone who issued to them to be able to verify it. On the other hand, you want it to be trustworthy. You want it to be trusted. You want people to get a credential and trust that it was issued from X and to Y on this date, and that it covers these credentials. So this, I said earlier, I was going to talk about this consortium we're involved with, and this is a problem that we're trying to tackle, which is called the Digital Credentials Consortium. And when you think about credentials, there's really, the metaphor is a letter and an envelope. So the letter is the content of the credential. It's what the credential is and what it was covered, and those can take all shapes and sizes. But the envelope is the mechanism to securely deliver that credential to someone or to share it with someone. And the consortium we're working on is really focused on the envelope. So you think about taking an envelope and licking it and sealing it and putting an address and a return address and a stamp. We're really focused on a standard that's coming out of the W3C called verifiable credentials. And I think the learner employment record is using, their wrapper is using, we've worked with them to use verifiable credentials as well. But if we can arrive at a standard for the envelope, I think is a really big first step for being able to trust, but also allow flexibility in what a credential means. So I may be ranting at this point. I'll stop there.
Thanks. You know, and Olivia, you know, from your vantage point, you know, what should we be paying attention to make sure everyone's going to benefit from a kind of greater transparency around competencies? You know, what do we got to make sure, and credentials, what do we got to make sure, you know, are not some sort of negative unintended consequences to getting a more standardized, transparent competency framework out there?
Well, first of all, I probably don't have to state this, but you know, in our career education programs, everything is based upon stackable industry certifications. However, you know, one of the things we really have to do is make sure that that's consistent across all of the programs. And so the California Cybersecurity Workforce Cybersecurity Task Force has developed a statewide subcommittee that is taking a look at, or actually is defining the cybersecurity career education pathway in California. And that subcommittee is made up of educators, employers, industry, public, and private. And the important thing is that the outcomes and the feedback that we're getting from that committee is part of California's process of model curriculum. And model curriculum starts with very basics that would go into the beginnings of any program, but then it branches off into the different pathways. And again, with input from employers and educators, and kind of like a menu-based approach to it, but what we want to make sure of to get the trust of employers that is consistent. If you get this, if you achieve and complete a program in a college in Southern California, it's going to be the same as a program that you would in Northern California. And that is what creates, I believe, creates some trust from employers that when they see these credentials, whatever they are, they're going to be consistent with what they're expecting.
You know, it's a great caution, right? Because we know, we look at other industries, you know, some parts of the country, you know, that's the sort of, you know, the credentials widely used. Other parts of the country, people are barely aware of it, right? And it does limit the kind of value of credentials if they are so sort of hyper-local in the employer uptake. Well, we have just a couple minutes, so I just want to ask one last question to everybody, and not to get too much into predicting the future, but let's imagine over the next couple months there is another kind of investment in higher education, right? As part of sort of the next chapter in sort of recovery efforts, some more resources are available. And sort of money kind of flows your way. Just give us, sort of a minute on, what you think the best use of additional resources would be right now for the kind of work you're doing, for the kind of education training you think we need to have in the cybersecurity field. Tim, I want to start with you.
I think that if I had a big purse of money that was given to the program, I think that the best route that I would use that money for would be to increase our ability to reach out to our underserved populations and to get them into the program, because a lot of people really don't understand that this is a possibility when they've been told their whole life it's not. The other thing that I would say is to be able to purchase the additional software and hardware that we need in order to, not only theoretically talk about things, but demonstrate to students and have them use these things. So when they go to work and they show up in front of an employer, they can actually do it.
Terrific. Olivia, how about you? How would you spend some additional money?
Again, same thing that Tim's talking about, but in general, awareness. So many of the people we're trying to reach and we know that we can help are not aware of the opportunity. They just believe it's not in the scope of something that they can do. I think that awareness has to go internally in our systems as well. Our counselors need to better understand, our workforce development partners need to better understand what the opportunities are, our community-based organizations. I think that is, if I had a bigger budget, that's what I would be doing. And we're doing, and not to say we're doing a little bit of that, but it's just not enough.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great thing to keep in mind here, because it's easy enough not to invest in, whether you want to call it marketing or navigation, whatever way you want to describe it, but are we telling the story broadly enough and in ways that will engage students who have been underrepresented in the industry? So Matt, I'm going to give you the last word here. From your vantage point, what we had extra money in the system, where should it go?
So I love being asked how to spend money, first of all. I think we have an opportunity right now where we just spent the past year in a pandemic, and as a result, everyone had to learn how to move all of their courses online. So we've got all this great content online. And so let's make use of that opportunity and spend that money figuring out how to convert that content so that it can in the future serve a competency-based model where you can mix and match small chunks of content and create personalized courses on the fly. So let's spend that money getting our content from the past year ready for that future.
Terrific. Well, I hope everyone can join me in thanking our speakers today and what's been a great conversation. I think I'm going to hand this back, to Mike.
To Randy. Mike, I appreciate you taking it over. Thank you, Chauncy. Thank you, panel.